So welcome everyone to the Central East Regional Presidents and Leaders Roundtable. My name is Reverend David Pyle, serving as your Governance Program Manager and this meeting's host. We're beginning our opening reading, which is brought to us by a former member of the Cherry Hill, New Jersey congregation, Edward Shemp, who was the 1963 plaintiff in the Supreme Court case that declared mandatory Bible reading in public schools unconstitutional. He said this: Unitarian Universalism is a fierce belief in the way of freedom and reverence for the sacred dignity of each individual. With Jefferson, we have sworn eternal hostility against every tyranny over the mind. Unitarian Universalism is cooperation with the universe that created us. It is a celebration of life. It is being in love with goodness and justice. It is a sense of humor about absolutes. Unitarian Universalism is faith in people, hope for tomorrow's child, confidence in a continuity that spans all time. It looks not to a perfect heaven, but towards a good earth. It is respectful of the past, but not limited to it. It is trust in growing and conspiracy with change. It is spiritual responsibility for a moral tomorrow. So with that as the center that brings us together, I welcome you all to this call. We did a quick run through of all the different states that are here, but I'd like to do it again because more people have joined us. So how many people are here from? We'll start with the one. Oh, there is lots of ambient noise. I'm going to invite you all, if you are not speaking, to mute yourselves. And I will help with that. So somewhere down near the bottom will be a place that you can hit mute. All right. Has everybody found their mute buttons? All right. So that's good. Thank you all for doing that. What I'd like to do is go through the states that are here. If we were to do a check-in, we would not catch with everybody. We practiced this a minute ago. So how many people are here? Say yes. How many people are here from West Virginia?
Yes.
Anybody here from Virginia?
Virginia, did you say?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Anybody here, remember to unmute and mute. How many people are here from Maryland?
Yes.
Yes.
Here.
There we go. Remember to mute and unmute. How many people are here from Delaware?
Delaware.
See, Delaware is in the house. Okay. How many people are here from Pennsylvania?
Here.
Yes.
There we go. Welcome. Anybody here from New Jersey? Still no. Okay. Anybody here from New York State?
Yes.
Yep.
And how about from Ohio?
Yes. Yes.
So now, we all got to check in about which states were here for the call, but also to practice muting and unmuting. So thank you all for doing that. We also had some people in the chat let us know where they were from. So welcome. I'm going to go ahead and start us on by sharing our screen workshop. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Presidents and Leaders Roundtable. Wonderful.
Yes.
So we began with our chalice lighting just a moment ago. So the purpose of this call, we started these, this came as a request from congregations to have a regular time where we are able to come together and share information with congregation leaders, share a short program, but also to find a time that you all can share with one another. It's to offer a regularly scheduled opportunity for congregational leaders to connect with UUA Central East Regional staff. And quite a few staff members are on this call. We'll give a chance for them to say who they are and where they are and what their program manager areas are in just a few minutes. It's to share a few good ideas monthly with all congregational presidents and leaders. So I will be making that presentation about a few good ideas today. It's to build community between the leaders of the congregations of the Central East region of the UUA and for Central East regional staff to hear directly what is important to you, to aid in developing program and capacity building training. Now we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. This month we're all still going to all stay together as one group, but starting maybe next month or the month after that, we're actually going to break down into different groups by different categories of things congregations are working with or by congregational size, but we're not doing that today. So any questions about what the purpose of this call is, what our goals are? Hearing none, our agenda, child sliding and welcoming, go through the purpose of this call, introducing our congregational life staff. Then we're going to take a look real quickly at the website. Real fast, we're going to do two things, not the whole website we did last month, but two things. For the, how to find the calendar and how to find who your primary contact is. We'll talk a little bit about the April 1st Leadership Day and UUA presidential debate that is coming up. We have about a 15, 20-minute presentation on bylaws, policy, and procedure, and what is the difference, and there will be a time period in that. I will do my best to make it interesting, and there will be a time period in that for you to be able to ask questions. And then we want to hear from you. And the question I want you to begin thinking about, what is the primary challenge your congregation is working with? What is it that you all, that is really drawing your board and your leadership, drawing your energy, your time and talent at the moment? And we're going to see if there's commonalities amongst us. So be thinking about, not everyone may get a chance to share, but we will ask, for a few of you to share what is the primary challenge that your congregation may be working with. And I see in the chat, someone is coughing and making noise. If you could make sure, once again, to mute if you are on, you're not speaking. So thank you. So with that, and then we'll have some closing words. Are there any other questions? Any questions about our agenda? Hearing none. So introducing our Central East Regional Congregational Life Staff. I'm going to take us off share for a moment so that we can see each other while we do this. And I would first like to invite Reverend Megan Foley, if you'd be willing to just say what your role is on the Central East Regional staff, and share anything else you'd like to share about your program manager areas.
Hi, everyone. I am the regional lead for the Central East region, and so most of the time I'm managing the staff team for the region, which is fun work for such a great group of people. And I also am the primary contact for the DC area congregation, so all around the Beltway. And I also have expertise in small congregations, so you may also see me in your neck of the woods if you are looking for small congregational information. I also teach a class. I'm teaching a class this semester on our online leadership institute on revitalizing the smaller congregation, so you may see me there too.
Thank you, Megan. And I see that Reverend Hope Johnson is with us. Hope, would you be willing to share a little bit?
Well, hi. I'm at my home office in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I serve as a congregational life consultant, and my primary area of responsibility is Long Island, for those who know, and also I have part of Brooklyn, New York. My area of expertise is basically conflict transformation. So we've moved from, just identifying conflict to how can we transform conflict to something really beautiful and to right relationship, basically. In addition to that, I'm very involved in interpersonal relations and a cross-cultural setting. And I also am part-time minister of a small congregation in Garden City, Long Island, New York. And it's a joy to be a part of this. I'm here because we have two new co-presidents who got the memo too late. So I said, hey, I'll be your sub. Here I am. It's good to be here with all of you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Hope. And I'm looking at our list. Are there any other members of the regional staff on the call tonight? It does not appear so. So amongst others, and next month, our spotlight and regional staff member will be Andrea Lerner, who will be coming on to talk next month about the new transitions programs and the changes that are happening within how we, your UUA, supports congregations in times of professional staff transition. So just as a feeder for, to draw you all into next month's meeting, that Andrea Lerner will be the spotlight, and we have other staff are scheduled to be with us throughout all of these calls. So with that, the spotlight for this month is awkwardly, and let me do the share screen. Awkwardly, the spotlight for this month is me. So I am in the position of telling you a little bit about who I am. So it's great to be with you all. My name is the Reverend David Pyle. I am in a couple of different roles with you all. So I serve as the primary contact for the congregations of the greater Baltimore area, of the central Pennsylvania area, and of the Delmarva Peninsula, which is that part on the eastern side of the Chesapeake River where there's pieces of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, and it took me about 3 months to figure out how they got the word Delmarva once I moved here. So it is, I come here from having served congregations as a parish minister in Illinois, in Michigan, and in California. And on my program manager areas, the areas where I am helping to coordinate our regional program, are in governance. So all boards and everything from boards and bylaws and how decisions are made in congregations, to ministry arts, which is worship and pastoral care and committees on ministry and the like. I am coordinating our regional adjunct consultant program, where we have lay leaders and other ordained leaders such as yourselves, who we've asked to bring their expertise to be available to you all. And we're building that program at the moment. It'll be debuting in the next couple of months, over the next couple of months. I also have a responsibility to support our justice programs in our congregations, and to help congregations who've experienced difficulty with challenges with professional staff. So that's kind of my roles within our regional staff. I am also an Army Reserve chaplain based out of Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I live in Wilmington, Delaware. So I just, as the end of the spotlight, I ask if there's any questions about who I am and the work that I do for you and your congregations. None. So we'll have one staff person present something like that each month. Last month it was Megan Foley. So if there aren't any questions, we can continue on. So a few minutes to talk about the Central East Regional website. We're still, this is one of the things that we did was we took 4 district websites and developed them into one regional website that is a part of UUA.org. And I'm going to share that website and just show you a couple of real quick pieces. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So the first piece is just, this is the website. It is uua.org/Central East. You can also just go to uua.org and put Central East in, and it will come up. In fact, there's several web addresses that will bring it up. So just about everything you could imagine will bring you here. And the 2 sections I want to show you all today, the first section is the events and webinars. And so where you would find it is scrolling down to right here, this little section right here, and it brings up, if you click on it, it brings up a calendar. And in that calendar is all different kinds of activities. Now, some of these activities in this calendar are regional programming, things that we, the region, are running. But there are also other programs that are in this calendar that are just important to our congregations, that are being run by different congregations or different other organizations of Unitarian Universalism in our area. For example, we have a congregation has sent us the information for the installation of their new called minister, and that goes on the calendar. And we have here the UU Legislative Ministry of New Jersey Issues Conference, and that is on the calendar. Our hope is that this becomes a resource for Unitarian Universalism in the area, not just of what regional programming is happening, but what we are all doing together. So that one, as you're planning events, you can take a look at and see if there's anything else happening in your area. If there are other cluster activities. If you have something you wish to have on the calendar, my advice to you would be to contact your primary contact, and they'll help you discern if this is a good thing to go on the calendar, and if it is, they'll help you to contact Beth Casebold, who is our communications consultant and director for the region, and can make it happen so that that event is on the calendar. Any questions about the Central East Regional calendar?
David, I have a question. This is Barbara in Rochester, New York. I've got the calendar pulled up on an iPad.
Yes.
And I don't have the purple markings with the exception of Slud UUA Retreat. All the other ones are not showing up. The yellow ones are showing up.
But the purple ones are not. That's interesting.
But the purple ones are not.
What I'm to do is if you could send an email to that case, I'm highlighting a number. Or an email address. It's bcasebold@uua.org. And that's Beth Casebold, our communications director, and she can address that issue. But also, you can also send her in for, she can also help you discern if an event is right for the calendar. So you can send that email with an event happening that your congregation is doing, particularly one that you want to be open to other congregations to attend. If you've got a wonderful concert or something that's more local, that may not be right for the calendar. But if you're having a workshop or a training or something that would be useful, that's the kind of thing that a workshop or training that would be useful to invite other congregations. That's the kind of thing we would love to have up on the calendar. So you have the option of emailing Beth Casebold directly or completing the form and emailing the details. So. Yeah. And you can also always talk to your primary contact. Any other questions about the calendar? We need your help to make this tool everything it could be and should be. So thank you all. The other thing I wanted to point out was where to find your primary contact. Is there anyone on this congregational call right now who does not know who your primary contact is? Let me know who you are and what congregation you're with. And there is someone who has music playing in the background that is very nice. Does everyone on this call know who your primary contact is?
No, but I'm too shy.
Oh, come on. You don't have to tell us who you are. Just tell us the congregation.
UUC Jeff, or Glens Falls, New York.
Glens Falls, New York. So you click on this, find your primary contact. You come to this website, you click on this, find the primary contact. It pulls it up. And then this brings you to this page right here. And then you scroll down to New York. And right here, there is New York. And you then go to Glens Falls. Right there. And you click on it, and your primary contact is the Reverend Joan Van Beesler. And there is her email address and phone number. And the primary contact, the idea behind the primary contact is that UUA is very broad and wide, and it's hard for us to expect congregational leaders to be able to know what all support might be available. So every contact has one UUA staff person that is assigned to your congregation to be that first call, to be that person that either will help you directly or will make a referral to help your congregation with whatever it is you're looking for. So any questions about the primary contact?
Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to take us off share screen for just a moment. So maybe we can see who has the music. That appears to be 302-270-2926.
That's correct.
Is there
My
music in
husband's
the
taking
background?
music. Yeah, my husband is taking his clarinet lesson.
So I'm going,
I took my lesson first so I could come to this call. And
it's wonderful.
So, yeah.
If you could mute yourself, that would be great.
Pardon me?
If you're on a phone, does it have a mute? Thank you very, very
Oh, yes. I can use it. Yeah.
Thank you. So, all right. So, any questions about the website? No, thank you all. So I'm gonna drop us into the next thing is that we talked about this last month, but we're gonna talk about it again. Coming up on April 1st, we have and I'm gonna invite Reverend Megan Foley to jump in here and add something that I don't add if I miss something. But we have an event coming up called Central East Regional Leadership Day, which is going to be certainly at the Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland, but we are also working to create opportunities for this to also occur in other sites across the region the same day. And it's going to happen differently in different parts of the region. Be looking out for what will be happening more closer to you. But this is one day where we're going to invite leaders to come together in those areas and be available for some workshops, some trainings, for some community and fellowship. And the keynote event, the centerpiece event of that, will be a debate by the three currently declared candidates for the presidency of the Unitarian Universalist Association. All three of them will be present at Cedar Lane, and we will be live streaming that to the other sites. And if you're interested in being a site, your primary contacts might be interested in hearing from you to have multiple congregations come together. And we will be supporting programming in different areas of the region. So any questions about, so this is basically a save the date for April 1st. That's a Saturday. I think, and Megan can check with me, I think we're planning on that, the actual time period for the debate being at about 10:30 in the morning. Am I right about that, Megan?
Yeah, I think we have it scheduled for 10 to 11:30 right now. So I think that will probably be approximately the times. And also let me just add in that I think some of our already established streaming sites will be somewhere in the New York City area, in Columbus, Ohio, and at May Memorial Church, which is in upstate New York. So far we have those additional sites.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for adding that information that I wasn't updated on. So, I mean, I wasn't aware of, because things are moving and changing. So, May Memorial, Columbus, Ohio, and somewhere in Metro New York. And there will likely, and there may be a few other opportunities as well. So I still want to invite people to mute your audio. If I need to, I can mute everyone. One second. So thank you for muting. Remember to keep your phones on mute if you can, and unmute when you are ready to speak. With that, can anyone log into the streaming website on April 1st? And I think our intention, that was a question that came up in the chat. I think our intention to that is yes, but we're still working out some of the technical details of whether that is possible. Megan, do we have any new data on that? Yes, Megan says yes, we believe so. So the answer is that is our intention.
We're working on that. I think my understanding is that we would have my current understanding, which can change as things evolve, is that anybody could log in and watch. I hope that remains the case as we go along.
So thank you. So any other questions about the April 1st Leadership Day? So wonderful, thank you. So now we're moving into our the webinar section of this workshop, where we're trying to bring a short 15 or 20-minute section of just some good ideas about something, or a way to think about something. And like I said, next month we'll be on the new regional transitions programs, how we, the UUA, support congregations in times of ministerial search. But this month, what I thought I would bring would be to talk about the structures of our congregation, and in particular the documents based around the structures of our congregations. So this is a section of what is called the Board Basics Workshop, which we are developing and have been offering across the region, and will continue to do so. That's kind of a new board member training workshop. So be looking out for that. But this is just one section of that. So creating the container for your congregation. One of the things that is challenging about our faith tradition, and is also a great blessing, is that we have no book of order. There is no direction from the denomination. There's some great ideas and everything, but every congregation develops their own system and structure based upon their needs and their experience. And so we have 1,000 plus different congregations, each of which is organized differently in one or another degree. And developed by people with a variety of experiences from both within and outside of congregations. So our congregational governance structures often have elements of corporate governance, they have elements of nonprofit governance, they have elements of governance in educational systems. And so we bring all of that experience together into a congregation where we develop a way to make decisions together that, for the most part, works for us. Our congregations make decisions, and there are times that it is challenging among our congregations, usually related to conflict. But I just want to hold up that there is no right answer for how your congregation is organized. That governance is about creating a structural decision-making and accountability container for the congregation to live its mission, vision, identity, and culture. So the purpose of bylaws and policies and procedures is not to be the thing we do at church. It is to create a space with enough organizations so that the radical love of Unitarian Universalism can be expressed through the congregation. And while there is no one structure, there are, however, some good patterns that we've noticed for the structure, for ways our congregations can best be organized to live our faith tradition. And this conversation is really about how to document your congregational structure. Any questions at this point? So we're not going to talk about necessarily the good ideas of how to be organized today. We're going to talk about what documenting that looks like and why you do that. So are you all familiar with mixing bowls? You buy, I often would buy these because, I would go to the Dollar General store and I would buy those plastic mixing bowls that are like 5 or 6 different mixing bowls that all sit inside each other to go in the cabinet. So this is the metaphor that I'd like you all to keep in your mind as we're talking about the documentation structures for the organizations of our congregations, that they are different levels that sit within each other. So those different levels that I'm proposing as a really good shorthand for our congregational leaders to be able to think about those different kinds of documentation structures of our governance. The outside container, the biggest of the mixing bowls that everything else sits in, is the bylaws. Inside that, you have something called governing policies, which we'll talk about. The next bowl in, or the next 2 bowls in, are different levels of operational policies. And the inside bowl or 2 are procedures. So just hold that. Bylaws, governing policies, operational policies, and procedures. So what are bylaws? I hope all of you are aware that your congregations have bylaws. I hope that you all are abiding by your bylaws, because the bylaws are what creates the congregation as a legal entity. The bylaws are the outermost container in which everything else rests. It defines congregational identity and accountability and membership. Defines elements of the congregation, and this is the key part, that are directly responsible to the congregation through the congregational meeting. So a good set of bylaws, everything that is in it, everything that are in the bylaws, they are the elements of the congregation that are directly responsible to that meeting when the members come together once or twice or three or however many times a year as the congregation to vote on things. One of the challenges we have with congregations and bylaws is they often will put elements of their structure that are not directly responsible to the congregational meeting into the bylaws. And we'll talk about the challenge of that in a few minutes. And in the bylaws, anything that they can be used to direct anything that only the congregational meeting can change. So sometimes a congregation will decide to put something in their bylaws because they don't want any other part of the congregation to have the ability to change that. And that makes that element responsible to the congregational meeting, because only the congregational meeting can vote to change bylaws. That does not mean that only the congregational meeting can draft and edit bylaws, which I really never recommend trying to draft and edit bylaws during a congregational meeting. That's usually when you're doing edits to the bylaws in a congregational meeting, you bring them for an up or down vote and not try and change them on the fly in the meeting, because that's very difficult. So the argument that we make is that bylaws should be simple and clear and as direct as possible, and that you err on the side of not putting a structure in the bylaws. That when you're thinking about whether something needs to be a part of your congregation's bylaws, the question you ask is these three. Does this define congregational identity, accountability, and membership? Does it define elements of the congregation that are directly responsible to the congregation through the congregational meeting? In other words, the governing board, the board of trustees, is directly responsible to the congregational meeting. In many congregations, the nominating committee is directly responsible to the congregational meeting. Elected officers elected by that are directly responsible to the congregational meeting. Some congregations have their endowment committees directly responsible to the congregational meeting. And so those are the kinds of elements that you want to have in the bylaws. Is this making sense? Right? Things that are not directly responsible to the congregational meeting, I'm going to encourage you all not to put them into the bylaws unless there is an overriding need that no one else should be allowed to change the structure besides the congregational meeting. That would be the only reason. So the congregation, whatever is in your bylaws, you're legally accountable for following that. It is your legal founding document, and so not abiding by your bylaws could put the congregation at some risk for exposure for not following the foundational documents. Decisions that are made outside of bylaws are always complex and always have some risk of somebody legally challenging that decision. And the bylaws because we do not have a book of order, there are very few requirements. There are very few things that have to be in there. One of them, and this is something a lot of people may not know, is that your congregation's membership in the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations requires that you have a bylaws clause that in the event that your congregation were to dissolve, the assets of the congregation would be received by the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. But there are very few elements like that are bylaws required elements. They really are developed to speak to the specific situation of your congregation. If you're doing bylaws work, your primary contact can help you to know how to find the right resources on UUA.org. And there are even a sample draft of congregational bylaws on UUA.org. Any questions about congregational bylaws, the outermost container? All right. So the next one,
No
yes.
question, but I want to give a thumbs up to the website. We're in the process of updating our bylaws, and the UUA site and its sample language has been extremely helpful.
And it is. It's well vetted and very good, and I'm glad that it's been helpful. Any other questions or feedback on bylaws?
I was
I was just about to actually type a question there, David.
Go ahead.
The question in which I typed was, what happens when the bylaws are amended to accommodate a change? Is that, I know that kind of sounds a bit vague, but let's say that, oh boy, let's say that something had occurred at the annual meeting and the bylaws is not followed, but a vote is taken on amending the bylaws to accommodate that change.
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah. So I think I understand. Every congregational bylaw should have a section in it. Usually it's near the end of the bylaws that detail how the bylaws are amended. And there are some good practices around that, and the guidelines on UUA.org are helpful. But every congregation, as long as you are following the process that is defined in your bylaws for how you amend your bylaws, then congregations can amend their bylaws as they wish. I always offer, as the governance program manager, that if you're going to be doing a bylaws amendment, feel free to, I'm happy to take a look at them for you. And I know I just said that to a potentially 198 congregations, but the one thing I would say there, though, is I would encourage congregations not to try and do the drafting of bylaws amendments in the actual congregational meeting. It is best to form a team, a task force of the board, to really carefully craft any changes to your bylaws that you plan to make. In doing so, I would encourage you all to reach out to your Central East Regional staff primary contact who could have you all work with me as well. Does that answer your question? If not, I'm going to invite you to send me an email afterwards and we can talk a little more.
Yes, it does.
So the next level
Thank you, David.
Thank you. So I'm going to move us on. The next level in is what are called governing policies. Now, policy as a whole in congregations, there are lots of different definitions of policy out there. I'm going to give you one that I think works in congregations. Policy as a whole is what we do. Just what we do. All the things that we do as a congregation, policy is what directs us to do those things. So governing policy is, the part of that policy is who decides what we do. So governing policy is what creates all of your congregational structure that is not created in the bylaws. So governing policy creates different how parts of the congregation work together and talk to each other. And this should be the overwhelming majority of your congregational structure. Remember, I invite congregations to limit as much as they can how much of their congregational structure is defined by the bylaws. And the reason for that is one of flexibility. Bylaws can only be changed by a vote of the congregational meeting, which meets a couple times a year and is very difficult to bring together, and is a large number of people all trying to understand a change. And that's a challenging dynamic for doing a lot of structural work in a congregation. Governing policies, however, are approved by the governing board, approved by your board of trustees or board of directors. And so that is a group of people who have been empowered to go deeper into understanding how a change might affect. And so they meet quite a bit more often, and it's much easier for them to make the kind of adaptive changes that might come with the changing program and changing ideas and changing needs of the congregation. So some examples of governing policies. Before I say that, just because the governing board is responsible for promulgating, for approving governing policies, doesn't mean that the governing board has to be alone in developing them. The governing board has the ability to delegate to a task force or to others to be able to help them draft governing policies. And if anyone is familiar with the second edition of the Reverend Dan Hotchkiss' new book, Governance and Ministry, he has a whole example a whole appendix that is available to your that is a governing that is a cohesive set of governing policies for congregations to be able to guide. So it's in the appendix of the second edition of Governance and Ministry. And Samuel Price asks, he says, I love these slides. Are they available to us as leaders as reminders? We will send these out to the all leader list after this webinar is over. They'll be in the same email with the link to the video. So thank you. And feel free to use them as you need. So examples of governing policies. So board and executive linkage. So discussing how the board and however your congregation defines its executive, be an executive team or an operations team or a minister or even the congregational president. Governing policies define what's the relationship between that board and that executive, which could be limitations policies or direction policies. Those are two different styles. Board limitation policies or executive limitation policies say what the executive is not allowed to do. Executive direction policies say what the executive should do or is required to do. Two different ways of creating that relationship. There are also in governance policies, among them are committee, task force, and team charters. So structural documents that define this is what the religious education committee is, this is what its responsibilities are, this is how it's selected, this is who's accountable. Or task forces, such as a strategic planning task force. This is how it's selected, these are the members, this is what its charge is, this is how they are held accountable. Paul Silverstein asks, do you refer to the minister as an executive? Some congregations do, and so we hold that up as a possibility. This is one of the ways in which we're all different. Some congregations, the minister functions as the executive in governance. In other congregations, they don't. In some congregations, that's a lay leadership team. In some congregations, it's the president. So I'm referring as the executive, knowing that our congregations define this differently in different congregations. So some other examples of governing policies include congregational relations documents, such as covenants and guidelines about how we are together. Professional and volunteer position descriptions are also sometimes considered governing policies. So any policy that defines your structure and how parts of the congregation interrelate with one another in making decisions. That is what a governance policy is. And governing policies are promulgated by the governing board and can be changed by the governing board without needing the direct approval of the congregation. And that's what makes them more flexible than your bylaws. It also is you're less legally bound to be following every jot and tittle of your governing policies than you are to be abiding by the legal document that is your congregation's bylaws. So I'm going to stop there about governing policies and ask if there's any questions. They give you greater flexibility as far as adapting your institution than having the structures defined in the bylaws do. So with that, next one to move us. Operational policies. What we do. So operational policies are all the things we do as a congregation. They detail the standards and practice and applications that apply to the whole of the congregation. This is what most of us think of when we think of policy in congregations. In many congregations, who promulgates them, who approves them, varies. So in many congregations, the governing board approves all operational policy, but they can delegate the development of policy to somebody else. But they come to the board for approval. But it's not true in every case. In some congregations, the executive, however you define it, is responsible for promulgating operational policies. So if the executive is the minister would have the authority to set policy in those congregations. And I put it here for a hybrid approach. In some cases, there are some areas of policy that are the responsibility of the executive, and there are some areas of policy that are the responsibility of the governing board, and we leave that, you all will find the right balance for that. Usually it's the larger congregations that tend to have the executive be responsible for more and more of the policy approval of policy promulgation. In some congregations, individual staff or committees can set their own policy. This is not recommended. The reason for that is that policy is designed to apply to the entire congregation. So some examples of policy would be a building use policy. It gets problematic when you have the religious education department has one building use policy and the worship associates have a different building use policy, in that they're often not, the buildings get used for lots of things. So operational policies need to apply to the whole of the congregation as an institution, and so we recommend that it be engaged at the level of at the level of someone who has responsibility for the whole, which would be the executive or the board. And we have from First U Wilmington, we do at First U Wilmington. I don't understand exactly what that refers to. But Marilyn, did you want to say something? We'll come back to that if we find out what it refers to. So some examples of operational policies. A building use policy, how the building gets used, who gets to rent the building, what the rate, all of that, the standards of for example.
Yes. Question.
Dad, I lost it.
Okay, if you could type it in the chat box, Marilyn, that would be useful. So if we the safe how, for example, a building use policy that's universal might say the First Unitarian Church of East Overshoe only allows rentals of our building by groups that have values in line with Unitarian Universalism. Is a good solid part of a building use policy that applies to the entire congregation. Safe congregations, disruptive persons policies are another example of an operational policy. I hope all of you have that. If you don't, that's a good thing to talk to your primary contact about. And personnel policies are also the kind of operational policy that applies to the whole of the congregation, even though not all the congregation is employed. That personnel policy applies to the staff that work in all of the congregation. So a policy, an operational policy may have specific application, but it applies in all of the congregation. Does this make sense to everyone? Any questions? It said Olmsted, Ohio, UU has a part-time paid office manager. She reports to the minister and the board. The office office manager could be the executive. Some congregations make their executive directors the executive of the congregation rather than a minister or a lay team. Just to say thank you. But we have a good understanding of what operational policy is. There's no questions about that. I go to the next one. And this is procedures. This is how we do things. So where operational policy is what we do and how we do, who gets to decide what we do, procedures are how we do things. Procedures document all the ways in which we make happen what policy says should be happening in the congregation. And that means procedures have to abide by the policies that are passed by the congregational board or the executive or however you do it. Procedures document the institutional knowledge of how to make the congregation work. And this is really vital. And there's a lot of times there's confusion between what policy is and what procedure is. I make the argument that policy defines what we do, but a lot of things that committees might want to call a policy is actually a procedure. It's defining how they do what they do. So a procedure of maintaining a list of parents who are in RE who should be contacted with what the curriculum program is going to be each week. It's not a policy. That is how we do what we do. Therefore, that is a procedure. I think procedures are very important in congregations because they capture that institutional wisdom. And in any institution that relies on volunteer work at the level we do and that changes leadership as often as we do, capturing institutional wisdom in congregations is vital. However, procedures are often very informal. Procedures could be a learned wisdom shared, a set of notes taken by a committee chair to hand to the next committee chair. I think that the more formal they are, the better. But I understand the reality that we do not come into religious community to create documents. We come into religious community to transform lives and save the world. So if there is the energy to be able to document them in a really cohesive way, amen, wonderful. But we realize that we're in the business of the mission vision of our congregations. Good procedures, I also think, shift the power in the congregation based upon who knows how to do things. I'm not going to talk about any particular congregation, but knowledge is power. And if you are the only person who knows how to fix the lights on Sunday morning in the way that works best for the minister and the worship team, well, then, they're kind of dependent upon you to come in and do that on Sunday morning. But if it's written down somewhere, then power is diffuse, and lots of people have the capacity to do that. So procedure really does become an equalizing factor in congregations, and writing down procedure does get pushback because there is that element of knowledge is part of how people define their place in congregations. So just to know, as you're documenting procedure, we have probably the largest challenge in congregations. The greatest place of pushback is usually around documenting procedure, not around policy, believe it or not, in my experience. So procedures are often developed and approved by those who actually do the things. So procedures are developed and approved and changed by the committees, the teams, the staff members, and the ministry groups that those procedures apply to. And even a governing board should not have to approve the procedures of a committee. Committees can define their own how they do things. And even a governing board should have their own procedures, like how you take a vote in email in the case of an emergency. Right? If the board needs to do a quick emergency, having a procedure for how to do an email vote is the kind of procedures that a board should have, or how and when you distribute the board packet information prior to a board meeting so people have time to read it and engage it and come to the board meeting fully prepared. So any questions about procedures?
David, this is Hope, and this comes up when I do work with my congregations. Even though all that's needed, it might be an affirmation. Is it not a good practice to sort of get as many people engaged as possible so they feel that they're part of the decision? Where is the balance in terms of getting people involved or not with non-bylaws decisions, with policy?
So this is sometimes a conversation, and the question is how are people involved in a decision? If your answer is that the only way people can be involved in a decision is at the congregational meeting by voting on an issue at a congregational meeting, that doesn't seem to me to be the best way to have people involved in the work of the board. So this question gets to how boards do healthy disclosure and healthy communications, how boards involve congregational members in their decisions, how they communicate. So I hear the desire for real ownership of the work of leaders in congregations. The pushback that I would give, Hope, is that the congregational meeting is not the best way for people to be engaged in the work of the board. I really do believe that policy development really does belong at the congregational governing board level, and that the answer to getting that ownership is finding ways to engage people in the work of the board. And that's a different workshop, and we can think about that as a future conversation.
Oh, no, that's very helpful, because my question was not about at the annual board meeting. It was throughout the year. So I appreciate what you've shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Any other questions?
David, John Fulda here. What do you recommend in terms of the repository of all this documentation and how you make it available to any members?
Yep.
In other words, who keeps a copy of it, or do you do it electronically? Do you do it on paper? Do you send copies of this out to new members when they sign up? How do you distribute it? And what's a practical way to do this?
So thank you, John, for a wonderful segue into my next slide. The short version is, first off, it's having it in writing. Especially bylaws, policies, governing policies and operational policies. The bylaws are legally required to be written and accessible, but not necessarily on the website. They need to be accessible to the congregational members. Some congregations choose to put their bylaws on their website, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some congregations choose to make it available through another section of their website that's a little bit deeper or behind a password wall. Bylaws are, in essence, public documents, but they're not ones that you're required to have nailed to your front door. I also recommend that they be that you could share the bylaws of the congregation as part of a new member process, especially in a congregation that is based in congregational polity as ours are. I believe that all policies should be as clear, legible, and written in a similar format. One of the challenges of many of our policies and having leaders changing as fast as we do, and policies being developed by different successive boards, is that they often are developed and approved in different formats and not as part of one cohesive whole or document. So I believe in having a board policy book that includes your bylaws. When a new policy is developed, it goes into the board policy book, and it follows a similar pattern, a similar structure to other policies within that policy book. So maintaining one congregational policy book that is available, maybe online, maybe not, but is available in written form, or there's lots of different ways you can make it available, and that's a different conversation. The question here is, who's responsible for doing that? And I'm going to give an answer that I think makes me unpopular with some people. I believe that board secretaries are responsible for maintaining the documents of the board as one of the responsibilities of board secretaries. And so as we understand the work of a board secretary, and I would even go so far as to say this is more important than having that board secretary take all the minutes. So maybe sharing minutes if that's too much to maintain the documents, but having the board secretary be responsible for maintaining, putting new policies in the policy book, making sure that it is available, making sure that it's cohesive and whole. Procedures can be written in writing, and a consistent format is useful, but it's not required. Bylaws and policies should be collected in one accessible location to the congregation. And whether it's behind a password or whether it's printed and sitting in the church administrator's office, just one location that is accessible. And one of the other challenges we often have with congregations is that the policies of the congregation are on different former presidents' home computers. And trying to collect them from amongst many different former presidents, and not knowing what is the most current policy because they have not been collected in one location. It can be useful to have procedures collected, but it's more important that each committee, team, ministry, staff person have them available and ready to share as needed. So each committee or team is responsible, I think, for maintaining their own procedures. And as I said before, church doesn't exist to create structure. Structure exists to create church. And this is all about creating the space for ministry. Did I get to your question, John? I think that was John Fulda, wasn't it?
Oh, yep.
Did I get to your question?
Yeah, yes, you did. I got it, David. Thank you. As a follow-up on that is, what do you do when you don't have a board secretary and that position's open? Does that responsibility fall back on the president?
This is the negative thing, is that when you are And Linda Sanders added something I'll put out in just, I should have said a minute ago, I'll put out in just a second. But the answer to your question is yes. Unfortunately, when a board officer position is open, the responsibilities for that falls to the other board officers and primarily to the president. Now, the president can delegate that, and you can even ask a member at large to step up and take short-term responsibility for some things. But the actual responsibility would rest with the congregational president.
Okay.
And Sue McNamara named, and I had it up here, but I didn't say it, that it is important to keep a change log for policies. And I think there's two ways that you do that. The first way is an actual that in each policy you track the different changes. And that's something that comes to us from academic policies and also from corporate policies. The easier way is simply have that board secretary is responsible for maintaining the board policy book to remove old policies and keep fresh dates, the correct dates on all the policies that are in the book. So you don't have to maintain old policies in congregations. You can just have the responsibility that all policies have the dates they're approved on them, and that only the most recently approved policy be in the policy book. Now, I usually like to save old policies in a separate file, just so that I have, or at the end of the board policy book, just so we've got a record of what was and what the changes were. We have Sue McNamara asked, when the minister is on sabbatical, who should the part-time administrator report to? That's a question I would invite you to talk to your primary contact about. That's a deeper one than we're going to be able to go into here. So that would be because it depends on the situation. There is no one answer to any reporting relationship or supervisory relationship in our congregations. So with that, I'm going to ask if we're already doing it a little bit. Are there any questions? With that, thank you all. My email address is dpyle@uua.org. If there's anything that you want to engage with me about later related to this or anything else, I'm going to move us. I got a few resources here. Once again, remember, we're going to send this out to everybody. Vicki has raised her hand. Vicki, what did you want to share?
What I wanted to ask was if, is the documents, are they kept in electronic files or actual paper files?
I think both is useful. Certainly kept in electronic files, but also I usually recommend that congregations maintain their bylaws and their policies, their policy book, in a printed form in the church office. But so the answer I think would be both.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yep.
So, I named a few things. Governance and Ministry, Rethinking Board Leadership by Dan Hotchkiss. We talked about that. There's lots of other different wonderful resources we're putting on here. I wanted to hold up the UUA Surge On Demand Learning Center, which has workshops and trainings there, and also the UU Leadership Institute. And as always, contact your UUA primary contact if there are questions that you have, and they can help you find the right resources. So with that, I want to take the last 20 minutes of our meeting and just invite, and I'm going to take us off screen share in just a second. But I asked you all a question at the beginning of this meeting, and that was, what is the primary challenge facing your congregation? And I'm going to invite people to share. As you feel called, we'll do this popcorn style. And I invite you to try and describe that primary challenge in a minute or so at most, so that we can get as many people as possible. We want to just hear, we as the regional staff, as your UUA staff, want to hear what you're facing, but we also want you all to hear from each other, because I think that normalizes some of the challenges. I find that we're working with similar things, even though we're often very different in how we're organized. So with that, we can see each other again. Is there anyone willing to start and offer with some challenges that you and your congregation may be facing?
I'll start. Steve Bertay, UU Congregation of Frederick, Maryland.
And thank you for saying your name and where your congregation is. I meant to say that.
And we're in the process, we're growing, and we're making a transition from a pastoral to a program-sized congregation, and that's what we're wrestling with. So all the changes that are associated with growth, increase in staff hours, and so forth. And to deal with it, one of the things we've recently done is pull together a team, short-term, 3-month, to do the initial brainstorming on looking forward. We're calling it UUCF 2020. So what in the next 4 to 5 years are the changes that we might expect, ramifications of our growth. Try to get a handle on how big we might grow and what are the ramifications of that financially, in terms of facilities, in terms of staff, and so forth. And then we'll take it from there. It'll be a long-term committee that'll have rotating membership, and we'll keep addressing these sorts of things. So that's how we're handling it.
Thank you, Steve. So there's two pieces there I would pull out. One is the challenges that come with growth, which are good problems to have, right? And the other is the challenges of making a shift in your congregational structures and size based upon that growth. And so anyone else, just kind of by a show of hands, anyone else that sounds familiar with? You can say yes. There's a couple people, so thank you all. Thank you, Steve. Who else is willing to share what the greatest challenge, some of the primary challenges your congregation and board and leadership are facing?
I'm one, David.
So pick one.
Greg Gall from MLUC in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia.
So that's Mainline Unitarian Church.
MLUC, correct. I know you've advised the church in the past, and other churches may have this also. We have a crisis of trust within our congregation. It's 600 people strong, a fairly old congregation in demographic age, and the minister has a particular issue that the congregation does not trust some of the decision-making, various areas between the board and the minister, on the capital campaign program, on fiscal responsibility. The trust has broken down, and it's been over years. We have several ideas about how to fight against this, but it's an endemic problem, and it seems to be exacerbated by, the normal UU situation of asking questions about everything. But it's more than that. So folks have, for instance, demonstrated, not massively, but some have demonstrated their displeasure by taking their donations to the capital campaign and withdrawing them. Some members have left the church. There are various levels of displeasure. So our relatively new ministry is handling this and trying to work with it.
So thank you, Greg. And I have worked with Mainline, and you all are continuing to. And this is not an uncommon challenge for congregations, and it is one that that often has long tenure, even across different ministries. In the relationship of trust in leadership and ministerial authority. I would wonder if I would ask if the people that are with us, if trust in leadership is a challenge in the congregations that you all have, and you could say yes or raise your hands, or I would be willing to bet that's a large number of our congregations. So thank you, Greg, for sharing that. I think we had someone else that was wanting to share at the same time, and I would invite that person.
I'm Becca from UU Congregation of Wyoming Valley in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And our challenge is we are very small, and just finding leaders. We have wonderful volunteers, but there just aren't a lot of people who are able to give the time and energy to do any kind of real leadership in the congregation. You know, they can do their 2 hours once a month, but that's about it. And it's a struggle for us to find people who are able to do more than that, and we need more than that from at least some people. So,
thank you, Becca. And you know, that is there's the old wisdom of you know, 20 to 25% of the congregation does 85 to 90% of the work, and that the challenge of that is that it often means we burn out some of our most dedicated Unitarian Universalists. So we hear that challenge. How many people on this call, you know, could see that challenge in your own congregation of really not having enough leadership? And
absolutely, yes.
Volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just one that I think it crosses our lines. And we do offer sometimes a workshop in the care and feeding of volunteers. That you know, how do you? I'll ask this question: how do you think you pay volunteers? You pay them in recognition and gratitude. So, and you know, the more that people see that their volunteer service is recognized and seen and appreciated, is the best answer we found to how to grow that culture of volunteerism in a congregation. So thank you. I see Vicki has raised her hand. Is there a question? And I also know that we have someone else who is wanting to share first. So Vicki, hold on and go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, it's me. Thanks. I'm not sure how to do this. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay. My question is, we want to embark on some strategic planning, and we're a little bit rusty on that. And in addition, we're in search. This is Paint Branch in Adelphi, Maryland. So what resources do we have to help us, you know, get started on strategic planning?
Right. So thank you. Who else has strategic planning is an issue that you all are working with in your congregations in some form or other? Nobody?
We do.
What?
Okay.
We do.
Yes, we are.
My heart stopped there for a second. Okay. Yeah. So the first step is I would recommend you have a conversation with your UUA Central East Regional Staff Primary Contact. Supporting congregations at the level, and that for you would be the Reverend Megan Foley. Pointing you in the right direction for as far as resources is something that our related to strategic planning is something that our primary contacts do. We're also in the On-Demand Learning Center, a couple of webinars related to strategic planning. And I usually point people towards the book Holy Conversations by Gil Rendell as a great place to really begin to start. And one of the changes that's happening among congregations that I work with is moving away from the 5-year strategic planning process that was really required by the Joseph Priestley District Chalice Letters Program to more of a 3-year rolling kind of plan where every year you're reviewing the year that was just completed, reviewing the 2 years that are upcoming, and adding a new year. So the strategic planning doesn't become this one project you do once and create this wonderful document that then goes on the shelf for 5 years. It really is something that is a regular part of the work of the board, that every year the board is doing some strategic planning work and being able to review the last year, tweak the next 2 years, and develop the next year. So we go into that in the board basics class, and there are also other opportunities for workshops that are related to strategic planning from time to time that our regional staff offers. And now that Megan knows of your interest, that's a conversation that can happen.
Great, so, thank you.
Vicki, you have your hand up. Would you be willing, are you asking to go next?
Yes, I am. And also, I did want to say that we're also in the process of starting some strategic planning. And one of the challenges, well, actually, the challenge that we have is, I think our average...
And which congregation are you?
Oh, sorry, UU Congregation of the Catskills, which is Kingston, New York.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're looking to see where we're going next. So we are looking at strategic planning also. And we recognize that our average age is about 60 years old. And we're a small congregation of 105. And we want to settle our minister with a vote on November 6th. So that's what we're working on now. I'm glad to hear there are resources to look at the strategic planning because I'm going to have a visioning task force that I'm going to convene. to take a look at where are we going and how are we getting there and how are we getting some younger bodies in.
So thank you. And you know, it sounds like you all are doing quite a bit of transition and change at the moment.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's a regular, and the thing about congregations that are in that level of transition and change is that there's usually lots of pieces to it, and it can sometimes feel overwhelming. Is that kind of where you have been engaging?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'll become even more overwhelming as we progress. So
Yeah. So any other congregations that are in a level of search at the moment? Search for professional staff, either ministers or religious educators?
Yes, Channing is in search right now.
Yep.
We're in transition.
You're in transition, yes. You'll have an interim minister. So that's Channing Memorial Church in Ellicott City, Maryland, and that was Evelyn sharing. So anyone want to share a challenge you're facing? And Patrina, what did you have? And you are currently muted, I think.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes, thank you. And which congregation are you in?
River Road, Unitarian, Universalist, and Bethesda.
Thank you.
The biggest challenge that we're having is that we have a whole bunch of older congregants who are unfortunately leaving us and passing away. And there's a new crop of younger people, but they don't have the same understanding or dedication to stewardship.
Right.
And so it's like two escalators. The down escalator is going very quickly, and the up one is going very slowly.
Right. So thank you. And this is a challenge that lots of our congregations are facing. I would ask the question about, some of your more longer-term sustaining members are leaving us, and that new members are joining, but they may not have the same financial resources, and they also may not have the same level of understanding and commitment to religious community. That's in some ways some generational change related to that. How many other congregations are facing similar challenges?
Oh yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
So I will tell you that there is a wonderful consulting firm that the UUA has a relationship with. It is called Stewardship for Us. And those that are in, we are blessed in the Central East region that multiple of their consultants, they're a national consulting firm, but multiple of their consultants live in our region. And they have a workshop that they do, and we're currently trying to schedule a couple of them to happen in our region. But they have a wonderful workshop they do called 21st Century Stewardship. That really goes deep into this issue. So you can go to stewardshipforus.com, but you can put Stewardship for Us into Google and it'll come up, and you can see where that's, and they're also available for direct congregational consultation to be able to work with you in, and also, once again, talk to your primary contacts. But we also have some stewardship trained specialists on our regional staff. I would point to Andrea Lerner and Pat Infante as deeper levels of specialty in helping congregations with issues of stewardship. But know that this is a challenge that is generational, and people that are coming into our congregations come in with a different level of cultural expectations related to church and congregational sizes. And Patrina also says Mary Catherine Mourn is also very insightful. Yes, she is. And she is a member of the UUA staff as the Director of Stewardship and Development. And also has a deep love for the Central East region because she served our congregation in Fairfax, Virginia for many years. So, if you see Mary Catherine Moore doing something, she's also a wonderful resource. So we have time for another couple of these. I hope these are helpful. It's just, I mostly want people to hear that the challenges you may be facing are not unique to you, that they're shared across many of our congregations. So who else is willing to share a challenge you may be facing?
I'd like to share what someone else has mentioned about the reluctance of people to step forward in positions of leadership.
And this is Evelyn Grimm?
Evelyn from Channing Memorial Church in Ellicott City. We have lots of worker bees, and they will sign up for one-time projects week after week after week after week for the same project, but they don't have the time to take on a long-term commitment to a leadership position.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is who for whom does this problem sound familiar? Anybody else? You know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And part of this is that the nature of volunteering in congregations is changing. The nature of volunteering in our society is changing. You know, there is some generational piece to this, but there is a move in our society towards people who will volunteer a lot, but they want to volunteer for short time periods, with discrete tasks and responsibilities, and a little less for volunteering for the long-term commitment. It's just a cultural change that we're facing, and there's some good ideas around how to change how your congregation recruits and uses volunteers to be able to, you know, make. I say this, and this is as close as I'm going to get to speaking about it generationally. Lots of people came out to volunteer for the Bernie Sanders campaign. But the Bernie Sanders campaign was ingenious about having them come out for short, specific periods of time to do something specific, and then to leave with some recognition. Right? So realize that there are some good thinking about how to change your own cultural expectations around volunteering. And those cultural expectations are not just related to generation, they're also related to race and cultural upbringing and background. So to be able to broaden your thinking about what volunteering means is really, you know, and I have a whole workshop on that we'll announce next time I'm doing it somewhere. Which I think, actually, I take that back, Evelyn. I think you all have asked me to come do it at Ellicott City. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
That's right. A little embarrassed now. So what kind of recognition do you suggest? Well, there's lots of different ways for that. And I will say stay tuned, and the next time we do that workshop, we'll record it, and we'll put it on the Central East Regional Online On-Demand Learning Center and let y'all know about it. Or maybe I'll do a short version of it for one of these president's meetings in the spring. But there's lots of different ways. You have to. People are different and like to be recognized differently. And so understanding how people are different helps you recognize people in ways that most connects with them and their spirit. And so so we have time for one more before we go. Who's got one that they would wish to share? This will be the last one.
Yeah, this is Paul Silverstein. The UU of in Poughkeepsie.
UU Fellowship in Poughkeepsie, New York. Thank you.
Yep. Right. So our challenge is, I'm sure one everyone has, which is it's the finance challenge, which is, you know, balancing the income with the expenditures. And particular challenge we have, I think it's a variation of what's been said, which is we have declining senior members who contribute a lot, and younger people or newer people coming in, so that our numbers are remaining the same, but our finances are going down, our income's going down. And then, so we're tightening, you know, the budget, but, you know, now we're getting to places where it's cutting into bone. So it's a challenge, and we're going to have to work through it and figure out kind of, do we kind of do something, you know, the next thing to kind of shave us down one more level, or do we do something, you know, radical kind of?
Right. So how many people have that finance challenge if you've kind of now gotten to the point that you're starting to really cut into the bone infrastructure of the
yeah.
Oh yeah. And that is an issue that a lot of our congregations are facing. We're almost done. David Carlson, if you could mute, please.
Oh, shoot.
Thank you, Reverend David Carlson from First U Baltimore, and thank you for letting me call you out for a minute. So this is a challenge that lots of our congregations are facing, and there is some good thinking about this. And part of it is, how do we share more? How do we be more interdependent amongst congregations? And it's going to take some creative thinking, and there's a lot of groups working on that. And I encourage you to have this conversation with your UUA Central East Regional Primary Contact. because that's more than we would be able to do in this call. But this is one that your first contact to get into the resources and ways of thinking and really creative thinking about what's important. And how to discern what's most important in your congregation. Your primary contact can help you do that. So with that, before I do a closing reading, I want to invite the regional lead. If there's anything that you want to add or share, dear Reverend Megan Foley, before we go, if there's to give you kind of the last word in this meeting, or are you good?
That's awesome, David. No, I'm good. I think it was great. Good to see everybody.
So I'm open for feedback. We're developing this. This is supposed to be a tool for you and a time for you. And so if there are ways that we can make this better, my email address is dpyle@uua.org. And I would love to be able to hear from you about ways. I will say coming in probably the next meeting or the one after that, we're going to begin experimenting with doing breakout rooms for this session so that it won't be the whole group, so that we have different groups. You choose a room to go into, and there will be a regional staff person there to help you with specific conversations in those areas. And we may do that by size, we may do that by challenge. There's lots of different ways we may do it. But as we're building, thank you all for coming tonight and dedicating some time. And more importantly, thank you for your leadership in this faith tradition. It is our congregational boards and leaders that are the religious leaders of Unitarian Universalism. That you are the franchise holders of liberal faith in your communities, and we don't say thank you to you often enough. And thank you for your support for the annual program fund of the UUA, which allows us to be able to serve you and allows us to be able to be there when you need us and to walk with you in creating the transformation that this world needs. And so with that, I offer these closing words from the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. He said this: "The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together the vision widens, and our strength is renewed." Thank you all for your time and being with us tonight. Go forth in peace, and we will send this video out in the next couple of days. Be well and blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.